Charles Houston once said, "Nobody needs to explain to a Negro the difference between the law in the books and the law in action." Despite the Brown decision, Southern states defiantly upheld segregation. They waged a campaign of delays, obstruction, and violence they called massive resistance.
This nation was originally constituted as a government of laws, not of men. We are going to find out if this is still true.
Elected officials played to racist sentiment. Some state governments even declared the Brown decision unconstitutional. Across the South, a resurgent Ku Klux Klan, often with the support of local police, terrorized anyone who tried to implement the Brown decision. Black schools and churches were bombed. Children and civil rights workers murdered. Attorney Arthur Shores and his family were attacked when the court ordered Birmingham schools integrated.
And the night after that order came down, one end of my home was blown off. And I just lucky, nobody was injured. Well, 2 weeks later, when the first black entered a white school, 2 weeks later, they blew the other end of my house off.
Despite the violence and intimidation, there were by now dozens of able civil rights lawyers carrying on the work of Charles Houston. The Brown decision applied only to education, but these attorneys prosecuted Jim Crow in every other walk of life: housing, restaurants, transportation, voting, using Brown as a precedent.
Now, once that decision was rendered by the Supreme Court, it was easy to get the court to strike down state-enforced racial segregation in all other areas of the public life of the American community, so that there wasn't a single area that anybody could think of in 1964, 10 years after the Brown decision, in which the Supreme Court hadn't rendered some kind of decision barring segregation.
But it would take a mass movement, people willing to put their bodies on the line to give life to these new legal principles, and trigger the social revolution which would transform the South and bury Jim Crow. Atlanta Congressman John Lewis, son of a sharecropper, was arrested 40 times during those struggles.
During that period, I saw people literally grow up overnight. Young people, young black people sitting in at a restaurant on a lunch counter, ride on a bus to Montgomery, marching in Selma or in the streets of Birmingham, grow up because people start saying the law is on our side.
Each night on television, the civil rights movement educated all of America about the meaning of the Constitution. The whole country had finally become Charles Houston's classroom. Charles Morgan was a civil rights attorney during those turbulent years.
And all over the United States, every night was election night, and every night people in the United States watched the news, and every night they made up their minds. And as they made up their minds, they forced the Congress of the United States to confront the issue, make up its mind, and pass the civil rights bills.
Ain't gonna let nobody love me right.
One by one, the barriers set up by Plessy and Jim Crow crumbled. In 1956, Montgomery buses are integrated. In 1957, a reluctant President Eisenhower orders troops to protect black students integrating Little Rock schools. In 1960, students sit in at segregated lunch counters. In 1961, Freedom Riders integrate interstate buses. Finally, in 1964, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act, and in '65, the Voting Rights Act, committing the federal government to enforce the constitutional rights of all its citizens. Almost 100 years after the 14th and 15th Amendments were first adopted.